The studio of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert shimmered under the bright stage lights. Applause thundered through the room as the audience braced for an evening of sharp wit and laughter, while millions more tuned in from their screens, unaware that they were about to witness a moment no one could have predicted. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for the latest stories. At the center of it all sat Stephen Colbert, his signature smirk in place, eyes gleaming with intelligence and sarcasm. A master of satire, he had spent over 2 decades turning politics into punchlines. Across from him sat Caroline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in history. Her platinum blonde hair framed a sharp, unwavering gaze. She was a force, a fierce representative of conservative Gen Z, loyal to the Trump administration and unafraid of confrontation. Colbert leaned forward, setting the tone with his first jab, his voice light but loaded. "Caroline, are you here to defend Trump or to teach me how to make TikToks for your generation?" Laughter exploded from the audience. Applause rang through the room, but Leavitt didn't even blink. She leaned in, her cool smile unshaken. Then, with a voice as steady as steel, she fired back. "I'm here to speak the truth, Stephen. Something you might not have tried in the last 2 decades while turning everything into a punchline." Laughter died. The room shifted. A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Colbert, momentarily caught off guard, quickly recovered, his trademark smirk returning. He rested his hands on the desk, his voice still laced with humor. "The truth? Huh? So tell me, has satire ever changed the world? Or do you think your White House speeches will?" A few chuckles broke out, some claps here and there, but Leavitt wasn't rattled. She straightened, arms crossed, gaze locked on him. "Satire," she said, her voice razor-sharp, "is just an excuse for you to dodge responsibility, Stephen. You mock everything, politics, people, even real issues. But what have you built? You make people laugh. They go home. The world stays the same. Meanwhile, I stand before the press every day, answering real questions, defending what I believe in." She let her words linger. A small pocket of applause rippled from one corner of the room, but most remained silent, eyes darting between the two. Colbert let out a chuckle, half genuine, half rehearsed. He was in his element again. "Caroline, I'm not dodging anything," he countered smoothly. "Laughter is my weapon. I expose the truths people like you try to bury, the broken policies, the empty promises. I don't need a podium. I change minds. Right here with millions watching." Applause roared. A woohoo rang out from the front row. Colbert gave the crowd a knowing nod, as if he had just landed the decisive blow. But Leavitt barely moved. Instead, she tilted her head, offering a thin, almost amused smile. "Really, Stephen," she mused, her tone both teasing and pointed. Tell me, what have you actually changed? You say you expose the truth, but all I see is you tossing cheap jokes at people who are actually doing the work. I stand in front of the press, in front of Congress, in front of the world, defending my beliefs. And you? You sit here, safe in this studio making millions, by mocking others without ever taking a risk yourself." A shift ran through the audience. The earlier laughter had faded into murmurs, whispers. Some nodded. Others exchanged uncertain glances. Colbert's smile remained. But something in the room had changed. Flicker of irritation crossed his eyes. He tapped his fingers lightly on the desk, a small habit loyal viewers knew meant he was thinking of a comeback Caroline. He said, his tone less playful. "Now you say, I don't put myself at risk. I've been criticized, threatened, sued for what I say on air. I don't just sit here reading a script. I question people in power like you and your boss, and I do it my way." Leavitt didn't let him finish. She cut in her voice, rising slightly, but still perfectly controlled questioning. "No, Stephen, you throw stones and hide behind laughter. You don't face real consequences. You've got a team writing your scripts, a room full of people ready to clap for anything you say. I'm different. I stand alone in front of hundreds of reporters. Every day. No script, no hiding place. You call that risk? I call it privilege." She paused, staring straight at Colbert, letting her words hang in the air. The scattered applause from Colbert's loyal fans faded, replaced by curiosity. Some in the crowd began looking at Leavitt differently, no longer just a young guest, but a formidable opponent. Colbert pursed his lips clearly, searching for a way to regain control. He leaned forward, trying to slip back into his familiar satirical style. Caroline, you. Make it sound like I'm some clown in a circus, but if I'm not doing anything, why are you here on my stage defending your honor? He winked at the crowd, hoping to reel back the laughter, but Leavitt didn't take the bait. She shot back instantly. I'm here. Because you've mocked what I and millions of others believe in, Stephen. You think it's a joke. But to us, it's real life. You can laugh, but don't expect me to sit quietly while you turn it into a circus. She paused, her eyes locked on Colbert, daring him to find a response weighty enough to counter her choler. Took a deep breath, trying to lighten the mood with a quip. Okay, Caroline. You're tougher than I thought, but we're just getting started, right? He smiled, but this time the audiences laughed. Was sparse not enough to drown out Leavitt's strength. She nodded slightly, as if agreeing, but her eyes made one thing clear. She was ready for whatever he threw next. Stephen Colbert kept the smile on his face, but it no longer felt natural. His fingers tapped faster on the desk, a clear sign that Caroline Leavitt's last line, "Don't expect me to sit quietly." While you turn it into a circus had struck a nerve, the audience sat still, their eyes shifting between the two, waiting to see who'd strike next. Colbert, with the seasoned instincts of a veteran host, tried to regain the upper hand. He leaned forward, his tone laced with a hint of sarcasm. Caroline, you talk like I'm the enemy of truth, but I'm just a storyteller through laughter. What about you? What story do you tell? Standing behind that podium didn't answer right away. She took a deep breath, her hands uncrossing and resting lightly on her knees. Her gate remained fixed on Colbert, but now it carried a deeper resolve. Fine, Stephen, she said, her voice calm but sharp as a freshly honed blade. You want a story, I'll give you one. Not to make you laugh, but to make you understand. The audience murmured, some leaning forward, curious where she was going with this opener. Colbert wasn't sure if this was a chance to slip in a joke or the prelude to another attack. There was a guy I worked with. Leavitt, began her voice, slow but steady, as if each word was carefully chosen. His name was Jake. He was young, smart, and believed in what we were doing on the campaign. He wasn't the one in front of the cameras, not a spokesperson, but one of the quiet workers, writing speeches, organizing events, making sure everything ran smoothly, so people like me could step onto the stage. Jake was the kind of person you'd never notice, Stephen. But without him, we wouldn't have gotten far. She paused for a beat, her eyes scanning the crowd, ensuring they were listening. The studio fell silent, only the faint breathing of the audience audible. Colbert opened his mouth, perhaps to crack a joke and break the tension, but Leavitt raised a hand, signaling him to wait. He shrugged, leaned back, and let her continue. Jake worked tirelessly. She said, her voice starting to carry a hint of emotion, he believed. We were fighting for something bigger than ourselves, a vision for this country. But then one day one of your jokes, Stephen, or someone like you, changed everything. Leavitt leaned forward, her gaze now icy. Your show did a segment on our campaign. You called us fanatics and Trump's puppets. Your audience laughed like they always do. But Jake, he got caught up in that joke. Someone filmed him working backstage, added funny captions, and turned him into a laughingstock on social media. He wasn't a celebrity, didn't have hundreds of thousands of followers to put back. He was just a regular guy, and suddenly the whole world knew him as a fool. Colbert pursed his lips, clearly uneasy with where this was headed. His eyes darted between Leavitt and the audience, and then what he asked, his tone. In trying to sound casual, what's that got to do with me? I'm not done. Lead replied, her voice firm, cutting off his attempt to steer the story. After that video, Jake got fired, not because he did anything wrong, but because of the public pressure from people who thought laughing at him was harmless. He lost his job, his dignity, and for a while his faith and what he'd been fighting for. He told me he felt like the whole world had turned on him, all because of a joke he never signed up for. She paused, letting the words sink in. The studio was now dead silent. No murmurs, no laughter, but here's the important part. Stephen. Leavitt continued, her voice now carrying a new strength. Jake didn't give up. He came back, worked with us again, not for the money, but because he believed in what we were building. He didn't need the spotlight, didn't need applause. He just needed to know his work mattered. And today, he's one of the people I trust most. Not because he's the best, but because he's loyal. Because he understands real success isn't about fleeting laughs, but about building something lasting with people who believe in you. She sat back, her eyes never leaving Colbert. That's the difference between you and me, Stephen. She said, her tone now steely. I work with people like Jake, people who put their hearts into what they believe, and you make a living turning them into punchlines, then forget them when the stage lights go out. You call that storytelling, I call that sabotage. The studio fell into complete silence. The whispers were gone, replaced by wide-eyed stares shifting between Leavitt and Colbert. Some nodded faintly, as if agreeing with her story. Bear tried to jump in, his voice now a bit rushed. Caroline, I don't target individuals. Like that, I go after the system, the people in power like you and your boss. That's not sabotage, that's questioning. He gave a small laugh, hoping to lift the mood, but the audience's response was sparse, not enough to break the weight of Lit's words. She cut him off again. No hesitation. This isn't the time for jokes. Stephen, this is real life, not your comedy script. You might aim at the system, but you've hurt people like Jake, people who don't have a voice to fight back. You think it's harmless, but I've seen the fallout, and I'm here to tell you it's not harmless at all. Leavitt stopped her gaze, burning into Colbert. He sat still, the smile completely gone from his face. The audience, some with heads bowed, others staring at Leavitt with newfound respect. The crowd's breathing was the only sound left in the studio. Colbert took a deep breath, clearly searching for a rebuttal, but for the first time that night, he seemed at a loss for words. Lit sat calmly, hands crossed again, her face serene. But commanding Caroline Leavitt's story about Jake, the guy turned into a punchline by media, like Stephen Colbert, left a deep mark in the room. The audience's eyes shifted between admiration for Leavitt and unease toward Colbert. He sat there, hands no longer tapping, but gripping the desk's edge, as if trying to hold his ground. His trademark smile was gone, replaced by a rare tense expression. Leavitt, in contrast, sat upright, arms crossed, her sharp gaze like an arrow notched and ready to strike its final target. Colbert took a deep breath, attempting to reclaim the mood by slipping back into his familiar style. Caroline, he said, his tone aiming for likeness but betraying a slight tremor. I'm sorry for what happened to you're Jake, really, but you can't blame me or anyone in this business for every consequence out there. We do this to entertain, to make people think, not to ruin someone's life. He shrugged, offering a weak smile, hoping the crowd would clap like they always did. But this time the applause was faint, scattered, and quickly faded into the thick silence. Leavitt didn't let him off the hook. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Colbert, her voice low but brimming with power like an undercurrent, ready to swallow everything. You're sorry, Stephen, she asked, her tone tinged with mockery but unrelenting. You say you don't mean to ruin anyone, but have you ever asked who's behind your success? The writers, the stage crew, the people working. So you can sit here every night and throw those jokes? Do you ever think about them, or are you too busy laughing at others to realize you'd be nothing without them? Its question hung in the air, sharp as a blade piercing straight into CO's core. The room was deathly silent, eyes wide and unblinking, as if they just witnessed an unbelievable moment. Colbert his lips, his hands gripping the desk tighter, clearly struggling to find a response. He opened his mouth, his voice faltering slightly. I don't deny my team, Caroline. They're amazing, and I'm grateful for them, but I'm here to do my job. Make people laugh, ask questions. I'm not a hero, and I don't pretend to be. He gave a small laugh, trying to slip back into his humorous style, but the smile now looked forced. Lifeless Leavitt didn't give him a chance to escape. She fired stead back instantly, her voice rising slightly but still perfectly controlled. That's exactly the problem. Stephen, you choose laughter over responsibility. You think you're clever, sitting here safe in this studio with an audience clapping at every punchline. But I see something else. I see a man hiding behind witty remarks because he's afraid to face the real world, afraid to stand for something, afraid to own what he causes. You call that a job, I call that cowardice. The audience's breathing seemed to stop. Colbert's eyes widened, his face stiffening, the usual confidence nowhere to be found. He opened his mouth about to say something, but no words came out. Leavitt sat still, her gaze burning into him, unwavering. The crowd felt the weight of the word cowardice, a term no one had ever dared use to describe Stephen Collar, the man who'd built a career mocking the powerful. But now he was the one cornered Colbert, cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "Caroline," he said, his voice shakier now, "you're turning me into the villain in your story. I'm not hiding from anything. I put myself at risk every day. Criticized, hated to say what I believe is right. You might not like how I do it, but don't say I'm not accountable." He looked out at the audience, hoping to find support in their eyes. But all he got were blank faces, curiosity, and a few hesitant nods, tilting toward Leavitt. She didn't let him finish. Brisk Leavitt cut in, her voice now ringing like a bell, clear and irresistible. "You call sitting here protected by your team, cheered by your audience, a risk I face, hundreds of reporters every day. Stephen, no script, no friendly crowd, no place to hide. I put my career, my reputation, and my beliefs on the line with everything I do. What about you? You toss a joke and let others deal with the fallout. You're not the villain, you're just not brave enough to truly stand up." The studio was devoid of applause, laughter, or any sound beyond the hurried breaths of the crew. Frozen behind the cameras, Colbert bowed his head for a second, his hands releasing the desk's edge and resting on his lap as if he'd just been defeated. He looked up at Leavitt, his eyes. No, longer sarcastic, but carrying something deeper, perhaps confusion, perhaps acknowledgement. He opened his mouth, but this time no quip emerged, no rebuttal spoken. He just sat there, silent for the first time in his career, at a loss for words, livid. Sat back, her hands, crossing again, her face calm, but her eyes still ablaze. She didn't need to say more. Her question. Her argument had done what no one expected, rendered Stephen Collar, the master of words, completely speechless. The room was swept up in the moment. A woman in the front row whispered to her friend. She just knocked him out on his own turf. The whisper was faint, but in the studio's silence, it rang out like a proclamation. Core took a deep breath, trying to reclaim his voice. "Caroline," he began, but his voice cracked so weak it was almost inaudible. He stopped, looked down at his hands, then up again, his eyes no longer those of a confident host, but of someone forced to confront something deep within. Livid, didn't smile, didn't gloat. She just looked at him, her gaze steady as if saying, "I've said my piece. Now it's your turn, Colbert." Sat there, his eyes dropping for a moment before lifting, searching for himself amid the wreckage Leavitt had left behind. The audience didn't move, their gazes locked on the two on stage as if watching a boxing match where the knockout blow had just landed, but the fight wasn't quite over. Leavitt sat still, hands crossed, face calm but eyes still burning like a warrior. Victorious, yet ready for the next round, Colbert took another deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling as if trying to shake. Off the weight of the moment, he lifted his head, his eyes no longer vacant but sparking with a new resolve. He leaned forward, hands on the desk, his voice starting shaky but growing steadier. "Caroline, you're good, really good, I've got to admit. You just silenced me, something not many have done in 20 years. He gave a small laugh, not sarcastic, but tinged with sincerity, and the audience let out a few scattered chuckles as if eager to ease the tension. But I feel like I need to speak up for my perspective, my legitimacy. Don't I live it? Raised an eyebrow, not responding, but her eyes silently dared him go ahead and try. Colbert pressed on, his voice now stronger, though still carrying the tremor of someone pushed to their limit. "You're right about one thing, Caroline," he said, his tone deliberate, as if choosing each word with care. "Or don't always think about the people who get me here. My team, the writers, the crew, they're the backbone of this show and maybe I've taken that for granted. I'm not perfect, I'll own that." He paused, looking out at the crowd, and this time a few gentle claps rose up like a small encouragement, but Core didn't stop there. He leaned closer to Leavitt, his eyes sharpening as if he'd rediscovered a piece of himself. "But you're wrong about one thing," he said, his tone now carrying a hint of defiance. "You say I hide behind laughter, that I don't take responsibility. I disagree. I've spent my career questioning people in power, people like you and your boss. I don't just make people laugh, Caroline. I make them think, I make them doubt, I make them see the world in ways they hadn't considered, That's not cowardice. That's how I fight the audience. Stirred the applause, growing a bit louder as if sensing Collar was clawing his way back. He pointed at Leavitt, his voice rising, filled with passion. What about you, Caroline? You talk about responsibility, about standing up for what you believe. But you're loyal to a man. Millions in this country don't trust a man accused of lying, cheating, putting himself above everything else. Is that responsibility, or is it blindness? You say I hide behind laughter, but are you hiding behind loyalty? The studio buzzed with murmurs, some nodding with Colbert, others looking to Leavitt, awaiting her response. This was his strongest counter of the night, a final push to turn the tide to prove he wasn't entirely cornered. The cameras panned to Lit's face, and for the first time that night she smiled. Not a triumphant grin, but a calm, almost knowing one. She leaned forward, her voice still steady but brimming with authority. I've been waiting for you to ask that, Stephen. She paused for a beat, letting the words sink into the audience, then continued. I'm loyal to what I believe is and right, not just to a person but to a vision for this country. You might not agree with me, my boss, or the millions who support us, but at least I'm not hiding behind anything. I stand in front of the world every day. No script, no friendly audience. And I say, what I believe, whether I'm hated, criticized, or mocked by people like you, that's the difference between us. You might make people think, but I make people act. Its words rang out like a declaration, not just answering Colbert, but reinforcing her stance. Colbert sat back, his eyes no longer defiant but carrying a hint of reluctant respect. He nodded slightly as if conceding her counter had parried his perfectly. You're really tough, Caroline, he said, his tone softer now, almost genuine. I don't know what to say to that. Maybe you're right partly, but I still believe in what I do. Leavitt nodded back, saying nothing more, as if she didn't need to. She'd said all she had to, and the studio felt it. Applause began to rise, slow at first, then louder, not for one or the other, but for both. A clash that was more than an argument, a living lesson in belief and accountability. Colbert looked out at the audience, his smile returning, but this time with a different shade. Not arrogant confidence, but rare humility. He raised a hand as if to calm the air and said, Okay, I think we just had a real moment here. She doesn't mess around, folks. Leavitt gave a small smile, the first sign of warmth that night, but her eyes remained resolute. She didn't need to say more to prove she'd won. Not by crushing Colbert entirely, but by forcing him to look at himself. The audience felt the shift in the air from tension to something deeper. The cameras panned across both their faces, capturing this rare moment. Colbert, admitting partial defeat. Leavitt standing firm like an unshakable mountain. The atmosphere in the room was no longer as tense as it had been minutes before, shifting to a state of reflection, as if everyone was wondering, what did we just learn from? All this. Collar raised a hand signaling for quiet, and the applause tapered off. He leaned forward, looking straight at Leavitt, his tone no longer confrontational, but carrying an unexpected sincerity. Caroline, I've got to say this. You're a formidable opponent. I've done this show thousands of nights, met all kinds of people, but no one's made me stop and rethink like you just did. He gave a small laugh, a self-deprecating one, and the audience responded with a few warm chuckles as if they sensed him opening up. You're tough, you're smart, and you don't hold back. I respect that. I really do. Leavitt nodded slightly, showing a trace of softness. For the first time that night, she smiled, not a victorious smirk, but the smile of someone who knew she'd been heard. Thank you, Stephen. She said, her voice gentler but still holding its inner strength. I didn't come here to take you down. I came to say what I believe is right, and I think we've had a real conversation, something that doesn't happen often. On TV these days, the audience broke into soft applause, some nodding in agreement, as if they felt the authenticity in her words. Colbert nodded his eyes, now showing genuine curiosity. So, Caroline, he said, if I've learned anything from you tonight, what is it? What do you want me or this audience to take away when we leave here? He gestured to the crowd as if inviting Lev. It to deliver a final message, not just to him, but to everyone watching. Leavitt took a deep breath, her hands uncrossing and, resting lightly on her knees, she looked at Colbert, then turned to the audience, her gaze sweeping across each row as if speaking to every single person there. Success isn't about who laughs louder. Stephen, she began, her voice slow but resonant. It's Not about who talks more or who gets the most applause. Success is about who's still standing. When the laughter stops, when the stage lights go out, when all that's left is what you've built and the people still by your side, that's what I've learned from my work from people like Jake, and that's what I want you and everyone here to think about. The audience listened, some nodding. Slowly, others whispering to each other as if Lit's words had struck something deep within them. Cor leaned, back his eyes on Leavitt with unmistakable respect. He nodded, as if processing what she'd said, then replied, "You know, Caroline, I think you just taught me, and maybe this audience, a lesson I didn't expect when we started tonight. I always thought laughter was how I made my mark, but maybe you're right. There are things that matter more, like the people standing behind you." Leavitt gave a small smile, saying nothing more, as if she knew her message had landed. Seabear continued, his voice now carrying a rare sincerity. "I don't agree with you on everything. God knows I don't, but I've got to admit you have a way of making people rethink. Maybe I underestimated you, and I'm sorry for that." He extended his hand, an unexpected but natural gesture, and Leavitt shook it, a firm handshake full of mutual respect. The audience applauded again, starting slow, then growing louder. Not to cheer a winner or loser, but to honor a moment where two people from different worlds found common ground. Cor with his genuine smile, Leavitt with her steady gaze. It was the image of a clash that exceeded anyone's expectations. Cor laughed a bit louder, saying, "I think we just did something special here, folks. She's no joke. But I'll still try to make her laugh next time if she comes back." Leavitt let out a soft chuckle, the first sign of ease that night. "I'll consider it, Stephen," she replied, her tone playful yet still composed. She stood, adjusted her dress, and walked off stage with undiminished confidence, leaving the audience in a wave of even louder applause. Cor watched her go, shaking his head with an admiring smile, then turned to the crowd. All right. We need a commercial break after that. I need a glass of water and maybe some time to recover," as Leavitt disappeared backstage. The applause still echoed in the studio, but beneath it was a different feeling. A sense that everyone had just witnessed a profound lesson about responsibility, loyalty, and the true meaning of success. Colbert settled back into his chair, looking out at the audience, and for the first time that night, he didn't try to make them laugh. He just nodded, as if to say, "She's right." Partly, but enough to change something as the stage lights of the late show dimmed and the outro music played. Everyone in the studio began to stand, but no one rushed to leave. Murmurs spread through the room. Not the shallow chatter after a typical comedy episode, but lively emotional discussions. A middle-aged man in the middle row turned to his friend, whispering, "She just made Corey think. I've never seen him like that." A young woman nearby nodded, adding, "I don't like Trump, but she's got a point. There's something really powerful about her." Such whispers echoed everywhere, blending into an unstoppable wave of reflection beyond the studio. The clash's impact quickly spread outside as the broadcast ended. Social media erupted with reactions from live attendees and viewers at home on X. The Moirnarm Leavitt to Bears shot to the top trends, with thousands of posts appearing in minutes. One user wrote, "Caroline Leavitt just turned Colbert's stage into hers. That wasn't an interview, it was a knockout." Another post from a loyal Colbert fan countered, "Colbert didn't lose, he gave her space to talk and kept his humor. That's his style." The online debate split into two clear camps, one hailing Leavitt as the Gen Z hero who took down old media, the other defending Colbert as the unshakable satire. King mainstream media didn't sit on the sidelines. Either articles popped up right after, with attention-grabbing headlines like, "White House Press Secretary silences Stephen Colbert," and "The Late Show Showdown, who really won a commentator from a major outlet." Wrote, "Leavitt brought a new style of debate. Blunt, uncompromising, and unafraid to face giants like Colbert. She's a symbol of a generation that no longer fears traditional media." Meanwhile, another analysis backed Colbert. He didn't lose, he chose to listen, and that's what a smart host does. When facing a tough opponent, despite differing angles, all agreed on one thing. This was a memorable event, not just for its drama, but for the deeper meaning it carried in the studio. As people filed out, some lingered near the exits, sharing their thoughts. A young man with glasses said to his friend, "I think they're both right in their own way. Colbert makes you laugh and reflect, but Leavitt, she makes you feel like you." Have to do something, an older woman nodded. I've watched Colbert for years, but this is the first time I've seen him truly challenge that girl's no joke. These reactions weren't just fleeting emotions. They reflected a shift in how the audience viewed both figures. Online clips of the showdown racked up millions of views, with comments flooding the official Late Show video. Lit just taught Colbert a lesson in responsibility. One wrote, no core. Still the king, he let her speak and kept his cool, another replied. The debate raged on, but it was clear Leavitt had cemented herself as a new force, while Colbert was forced to reflect on his approach, something he rarely did publicly before, as the showdown between Caroline Leavitt and Stephen Colbert settled what lingered. Wasn't just a memorable night on The Late Show, but a lasting mark on its audience in a world full of laughter and contention. Leavitt proved the truth, spoken with conviction, can outshine any joke. She stepped onto Colbert's stage, not just to defend her beliefs, but to remind everyone that success isn't about fleeting spotlight, but about what we build and who we keep by our side. Colbert, though cornered, showed he's more than a comic storyteller. He's someone willing to listen, if only this once. This battle had no clear winner or loser, but it left a big question. Whose side are you on? Leavitt, with her unrelenting candor, or Colbert, with his knack for turning tension into lessons? Whatever your answer, this moment changed how we view responsibility, loyalty, and the power of words. The clash between Caroline Leavitt and Stephen Colbert mirrored a modern America where divides between generations, ideologies, and media grow ever deeper. Leavitt, with her blunt style and loyalty to a political vision, represented the rising Gen Z young people, unafraid to challenge old norms, like when she grilled Colbert on the responsibility behind his laughter. Colbert, in contrast, embodied traditional media, using satire to question, but sometimes seen as detached from reality, like the story of Jake, a man hurt by careless jokes. This event reflected today's US social media and TV aren't just entertainment, but battlegrounds where personal honor and communal values are tested. Daily, the lesson from this story lies in how Leavitt stressed the importance of building with those who believe in you. As she said, success is about who's still standing when the laughter stops, in a US context where political division estranges families and friends. This reminds us to cherish real connections, not just chase crowd approval. Like Kobe initially did with his claying audience when Colbert admitted he sometimes overlooked his team, it was a wake-up call. Don't let personal ambition overshadow gratitude. Live like Leavitt when she spoke of Jake, steadfast in belief, but never forgetting the quiet ones beside you in a chaotic America. True success isn't about the noise, but the foundation you build with those who stay. Don't forget to hit subscribe to join us in exploring more real moments like the Leavitt Core Showdown. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video for more thought-provoking stories.